keep in mind, pruning candles weakens the area where you're pruning. For developing a tree, you let the branches extend, you let the candles extend, and you only reduce them in summer. This video, Scots pine and candle pruning. And actually, I do the same thing for my white pine. It is early spring, the candles are extending, it is time to prune my pine. When to prune your pine, why to prune your pine, and particularly prune your candles in early spring? Do you know why? Leave me a comment down below. Now, if you look at a pine and you want to prune your candles, you have to really understand why do you prune your candles. The why depends on the age of the tree that you're looking at. Now this is a fairly old tree. It's a Yamadori. It was collected in Sweden. It was potted up in this pot 2 years ago, styled over winter. And this is the first year that it is completely wired out, but stable in this pot already for 2 years. Next to that, I have this younger plant. This is a seedling. I wired it out a couple of years ago just to get the shape, and it's just been growing in this little pot for a few years. I've not done anything to it last year, and you can very clearly see that now in this tree, and that is one of the things why I want to look at candle pruning today. So for a tree in development, there are 2 reasons why you remove the buds. First of all, you want to reduce the number of branches. You don't need all that many branches. Ideally, you have a main branch, the continuation of the trunk, and a side branch which is strategically placed in the right direction for your tree. So that's one thing that we do in late winter or early spring, or even in early fall, after the tree has started to slow down and go dormant. You look at the branches and you remove all the end buds that are not needed. You see here there's 1, 2, 3, 4 end buds. You can remove this middle one, and you can remove one of these side branches. Unless you really want the branch to extend and get very heavy, then you keep the middle one that's clearly much bigger than the other ones, and you remove the smaller ones. This really is where you have to choose yourself. What is my aim? You see that pop right off. That will do 2 things. First of all, as said, you'll have one branch that continues and a side branch, and you don't have this whole clutter that I now need to prune away. And if I prune it away, I get pruning scars. I can get clumping here at the original budding of last year, and that's all just not so pretty. But the other thing that's going to happen is, because there's fewer buds developing here, the buds lower on the tree are going to be much stronger. So the second reason for pruning young material like this and working on the buds is to direct the power of the energy also to the lower branches. You remove the strength here, favoring the lower buds. Now if we look at a tree like this one, there is another thing that we do in spring. Of course, yes, in winter you should go through the tree, and if the tree is healthy, every end bud will have at least 2 buds. And as with the young trees, you reduce those to just 2 buds. One for the extension and one for a side branch. It's a good thing to remember if people talk about pruning back to 2 buds, so that you get 2 continuation branches. Try to avoid that you get just everything splitting equally. If you look at the branch, it has very clearly a main branch, and next to that you have side branches. So when you're developing your foliage and your foliage beds, don't just prune back to 2s, but also think of what is my continuing branch and what is a side branch. So the continuing branch you let grow out further than the side branch. Now all the videos tell you prune back to 2. To a main branch and a side branch. Why is that? Let's look at this little pine where I didn't do that and show you what the consequences are of not pruning back to 2. Now one of the things that happens when you don't prune back to 2s is that you get multiple branches in one spot. As every attachment to the main branch leads to a little bit of thickening, this area will swell up enormously. So over time you'll get a very big bulging clump around these attachments. That's one of the reasons why we want to prune back to 2s. There's actually no biological reason why you should prune back to 2s. You can also say, I'm pruning it off here and this is my foliage bed. I am done with it. However, you can't maintain this. You can't really develop it. You can't prune back to anything, because the moment you prune back to anything, you're removing half of your pad. So it is good to have a side branch here and a side branch there and a side branch there, so you can shorten back to a side branch. But most importantly, when you're pruning back to 2, you facilitate wiring out. Now you can of course take a wire and wire your whole branch, just like this. all the way to the end. And then wire side branches. Add a piece of wire to your main branch, just like that. And then you wire out your side branch, just like that. And then for the next branch you do the same thing. But ideally that is not what we do. If I now try to wire 2 branches with this one, and I wire this one as well, what you get is that if I move this end, the other end moves as well. So you get some sort of a... So this is not a great situation. So wiring out is a lot easier if you prune back all your branches to one side branch at every location, and here another one, and there another one, and there another one. It's a lot easier to wire out than when you have it as a clump. So once you have wired out your main branch, ideally you have the wire coming in to one side branch, continue on along, and then wire your second side branch. This way, first of all, it looks neater. You only have one wire next to each other here. Second of all, if I move this one here, that end doesn't move. But back to the original question, what else do we do when we prune a tree like this? We look at the buds. You remove all the duplicates. That we've done in winter, and in this tree there are actually no duplicates because it is not all that strong this year. As said, I wired it out. Now, if you have not done the thinning properly in winter, this is what you'll get. This is from a pine that I'm growing out in my garden. And what you see here is there are 3 branches coming from this end bud. So the first thing I'm doing with these situations is remove one. But because this is all very delicate now in this time of the year, I am taking my scissors and I'm just clipping the middle one out. This is what you then have taken off. This is not very useful for the plant at the moment. Now, if you like this type of content, please encourage me to make more of it. Leave a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing and share a video or 2. So for this tree, I am just going to look at it and I'm going to see, are there any candles that are a lot stronger? What you often see is that you have 2 buds, that one candle grows a lot stronger than the other. The tree also just wants to extend one branch and have a side branch. These 2 are of unequal length, very clearly. And I try to balance them by taking the base of the longest and removing the part that is longer than the other candle. Now if you look at them, they are of equal size. In this tree, there's nothing to do, because all the candles that are growing are roughly of equal size. Normally you'd expect much longer candles here than there. But this is to do with all the work that I've done on the tree. Next year I fully expect that the top is going to be somewhat stronger than the bottom, and then I'll reduce the candles in the top and I'll leave the ones at the bottom. And if we now look closer to one of my other pines, this is one of those places where you see that happening. You see here that these 2 candles are actually of very different size. The problem is, this is not a long candle compared to, for instance, this one here. But also here you see that there is a small candle there and a small candle there. I actually only want one side branch. So I'm going to remove the one that's growing towards the inside. And then this one I can shorten a little bit. This is a very mature pine. It was styled 3 years ago. So I'm really now working towards refining this tree. I don't want these candles to extend. Now by removing the long part of this candle, by gently twisting it out, what is happening is that this candle doesn't extend any further and you only get a few new needles. Maybe 5, 6 needles on this candle. Here I didn't prune properly in winter. And you see there's 3 buds. So the longest candle I'm just going to gently twist out, and I'm a little bit late because they're now quite sensitive. And the other 2 I'm just going to leave alone because this one is already as short as that one or that one. Now this is something I have to do throughout the tree and check whether there's any candles that are a lot longer than the rest. Remove the tip, shorten them to be of equal length as the others. Do keep in mind, yes, you do reduce the number of candles or buds to 2 for every single pine that you're growing out, but the shortening of candles when you're growing it out is not really conducive to creating a thicker trunk or better branches. So normally you'd let those grow out. Now if you say, I don't want this very long branch extension because I'm really building the branch structure, is not all that important. At the end of summer, somewhere around August, the tree will actively start working on setting the buds for next year. So what you do at that time is say, this is what it has grown then. This is the end bud for this year, so these are not there. This is what has grown this year, and then you say, well, this is way too long, and you just prune it back in the middle of summer. And you say, this is the extension for this year. Then new buds will form here at the needles, and you only have a little bit of extension, but you have grown the thickness of the branch. Which brings me back to this young plant that I'm growing out. And where I last year forgot to remove the buds, I didn't prune it over winter, and it has basically just completely outgrown its shape. Now what do you do with a tree that looks like this, that you are growing out? Mind you, I'm not pushing this all this much for growing out, otherwise I would have put it in a bigger container. You see the roots are exploring the outside world rather than staying in the container. I really should do something about this. But how do you handle a burl like this? So now if you look at this, this clearly is an extending branch. And if I look at the curvature here in this, I could say this is an outside branch or this is an outside branch. But here there is clearly one branch on the inside. I removed this one. And this one is also growing to the back. I don't really want this one. I'm removing it as well. Then I still have 1, 2, 3 branches. There's another one in the back that I'm removing. And now I just need to decide whether this one or this one is one that I'm going to keep. I have a branch in the back here, so I'd like to have one on the side and not to the front, and I'm removing this here. Now you could of course decide I'm going to prune this long extension branch as well, but it is now early spring. If I now were to prune it at this point, there's a very good chance that no buds will develop here at all until the end of the year. So it's much better to just leave this and then later in the middle of summer to say, I'm pruning this back to size. At the end of summer, new buds can appear here between the needles. So I'm not removing any needles. As long as there's needles, you can prune back at the end of summer and have a very good chance of new buds forming here that then in next spring will start extending. Let's look. Here down below I have another one of those burls. And now I might say I keep this one because it's the strongest, but it is a side branch. I don't want it to fatten up, so I'm going to remove the strongest. I'm going to remove the second strongest. I'm just going to work with these two. And with that, this young pine is also completely pruned out for this year. I can now consider planting it in another container, or I could wire it out, or what I'm probably going to do, I'll just pop it in the corner somewhere, because I really don't know what I want to do with this. I made a little video on wiring these out, this one and another one, and since then I've not really done anything with it because I'm not inspired. If you have any ideas on what I could do with this tree, let me know. One of the things that I could do is of course remove it here. And this way you create taper. Actually I might just do that. Just like that. Now the tree is a lot smaller again. You've induced taper and movement at this point. And these buds will now strengthen over summer. Yeah, it's a start. I guess this is the future front of the tree. But I'm not really excited about it. Now, when you are reducing the length of the candles on your pines in early spring, keep in mind this reduces the power of the tree. It weakens the branches that the candles are growing on, and therefore by reducing the top more than the bottom, you make the top weaker relatively to the bottom, which is needed because pines are top dominant and therefore the lower branches are stronger. However, if you have a tree that is very much in development and you're looking for back budding and you're looking for new branches to develop and you're looking for thickening up of the branches, then pruning candles is not what you want to do. Now this is a tree completely in development, and here I've only thinned out the candles. I will prune this one also in summer, and then I'll get new budding here on these branches, which I need to really develop the buds. Reduce them to 2 buds and leave it at that. Just let the tree grow until the end of summer. Then you have branches like this. At that time you can always clip back the branch somewhere in between the needles. If you cut between the needles in summer, new buds will form here. And then you have fattening of the branch. You have a lot of energy in the branch. New buds will form here, but if you're lucky, they'll also form here, or even all the way on young bare wood. These little balls are flowering bodies. This is where the pollen comes from. I remove all of these because I don't really want flowers. I don't need the pollen and I just want growth on this tree. So I'm just rubbing them off very gently. And this of course also is not great, but it is an action that I do in spring if there's lots and lots of pollen cones and the tree is not very strong.